Welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Trenches. It's been a minute, Natalie. I'm glad that we were able to find some time to record again. And as always, I'm super happy to spend a little bit of time with you talking about all things peer group and all things MSP related. What are we talking about today?
So today we are getting into really the routines of an MSP. So basically service managers, things like that, that have those daily routines that really kind of need to be addressed every day, maybe monthly, quarterly, keeping everybody on track.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense because one of the things that we find a lot in our world is that there are things that have to happen throughout the year, and it's really, really easy to get completely sidelined by the tyranny of the urgent, right? The tickets, the clients that are irritated, the things that are down. Trying to close a deal, all of those things, the things that get in the way. And I think it's important that we think about routines for some of some of the more common roles, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about owner related routines and manager related routines for today. I'm sure we can come back to this, and we could probably talk about this for like an hour or two because of all the things that we see in the peer groups and those kind of things. So, but let's start today. Let's talk about owners for a minute because I think it's really important that we think about the routines that an MSP business owner should at least think about. And as you grow, these things might change a little bit. And when you're very small, you kind of own all of the things. But we're thinking about kind of the normal things that we would expect most business owners to kind of uh, get into a routine at some point, trying to not let the day get away from them. So, Natalie, what do you think? What do you think a typical daily routine would look like for an owner?
Well, for me, a daily routine would be, looking over your dashboard review. Whether that review is an actual dashboard or a scorecard, however it is, but really looking over that. And in that dashboard really should be some high-level tickets, sales activity, your financial health of your companies, cash flow, things like that, AR a little bit, just kind of see where things are. And then really going through and doing a cursory glance at like your teams to make sure everybody is kind of on par for what you need them to be doing for the day. But that to me is the daily owner check in that they should be doing every day and making time for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned cash flow in there, and cash flow is one of those things where I think it's really important that owners get used to that, especially as your
Mhm.
team grows. When it's you and you're running it yourself, it's a little bit easier to kind of pay attention to that. But you get 3, 4, 5 texts, 10, 15 texts. Someone needs to make sure that there's cash in the bank and that there isn't like careening towards the edge of a cliff at 100 miles an hour. And so paying attention to that kind of stuff is really important, but not getting too deep into all of the things. And one of the things that I talk about all the time, and this kind of leans into both daily and weekly, is making time for sales related stuff,
Mhm.
right? And this is one of those easy things for owners, especially of MSPs that where you don't have a sales team that can really get sidetracked on the tyranny of the urgent and forget to do the sales thing. I routinely tell a story about when I was running the business way back 25 years ago or so, before managed services was a real thing, and I got busy and I took my eye off the ball, and all of a sudden I got done with a whole bunch of work and I had to start my sales pipeline up from scratch again because I was busy for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and then all of a sudden there was nothing going on, right? So those are some really important things.
I would say on that weekly cadence, that sales pipeline is probably my top one.
Yeah.
And if you have employees that directly report to you, doing those management one-on-ones, you don't want to forget about that's just as important as your sales pipeline, in my opinion, because
Hmm.
you want to make sure that your employees are happy or that you're not the bottleneck for them, that you are, you know, I want to say watering the garden for the employees as well as for your company.
Absolutely. I'm definitely a weekly one-on-one kind of guy.
Mhm.
I'd much rather have a 15-minute weekly one-on-one than every other week for a half hour or an hour or something like that because if you miss one, then no big deal. You just catch it next week. If you miss one and it's every other week or once a
Yep.
month or something like that, then you're either having to reschedule or you just don't talk to to your people very frequently, which can be a problem. So that's big for me. What do you think about checking in on key clients? At some point, I would think that that probably goes away or pulls back a little bit. Tell me a little bit about what you think about like checking in on key clients as an owner.
Depending on size, right? If you're a smaller, that two or so lower million, those top key clients are generally majority of your revenue. So you definitely want to have some of those key client check-ins, um, weekly, even if it's an email, just something that you're checking in with them, making sure they remember that you're there.
Hmm.
And then if you once you get bigger, you have your account management team, you have those things. I still, even at bigger, even at 4 mil, 7 mil, those sizes, having that relationship with those key clients, even if it's not the same relationship that you had when you started, you still want to be able to check in, even if it's, hey, just jotting down an email over to them like, hey, how's everything been going? Things like that, because you want to keep those top 5 or 10 clients that it's still your baby at that point.
Yeah. Well, and I think we mentioned it before in a different one of our different shows is when we're talking about account management was that as an owner you need to keep some relationships with your
Yeah.
clients even if you have a full account management staff. There should be multiple layers of connection with your clients. I think that's an important thing to do, and I think the key there is that the further and further away you get as an owner from being, an account management person in your organization, that you end up shifting those conversations to more of like a light check-in versus a, hey, how's it going, like tell me all the things, right? You're checking in more on on an opportunity just to say hi, and just make sure that there aren't burning fires or things kind of bubbling under the surface that maybe people weren't catching. So if we think about shifting from that daily, weekly to more of that monthly check-in, I know that you and I talk about this kind of stuff a lot with our peer group members.
Mhm.
What are some of the monthly check-ins that you recommend?
My biggest monthly check-in is financial health, financial review of your company. And I can't stress that enough to any owner, that knowing your financial health, reviewing your P&L, reviewing your gross margin, EBITDA, reviewing the trends. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it going all over the place? And then really the health of the agreements for me is a big one as well. Not all revenue is created equal.
Hmm.
And regardless, the financial health for an owner is not just the company's financial health, but it's their own financial health.
Sure.
And for me, should never fall through the cracks. That should be a routine that you set aside time for every month.
Yep. Close the books, review the data, review the
Yep.
metrics, look at the graphs, look at all of the things, and that's the thing that you and I both have a ton of experience with, is helping build out dashboards and graphs as it relates to the EBITDAs and the gross margins and all of those things. And I don't want to get too deep into the financial conversation, but other than the fact that it's really important that you do that. I think another thing to take a look at monthly is the bigger projects you have going on, whether
Mhm.
they're and less so client projects, although that could be a thing that you care about. I mean, someone needs to care about it if it's not you. But I think the other piece is the rocks or the goals or the initiatives or whatever you want to call them, OKRs. There's like 100 different words for the same thing. But someone's got to check in on those as well. And if that's not part of your weekly check-ins, then that certainly needs to be a monthly thing. And certainly try to make sure that those big things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, you definitely want to check on anything that's being integrated into the company, where it stands. It does not have to be, a 3-hour check-in meeting with the nitty-gritties, but you definitely need to know if they're on or off track. Are there any barriers? So at that point, the owner's looking at, what can they do to remove the roadblocks for their people, and if they're the bottleneck.
Right. Yeah, owners can be bottlenecks and barriers and roadblocks all in the same
Oh,
breath, right? So obviously there's other roadblocks and bottlenecks too.
yeah.
And as the kind of the owner, the person running the organization, it's your job as a leader to remove as many of those things as you possibly can to let your team do the good things that you need them to do.
So, Adam, what do you think on we've talked about daily, weekly, monthly. So, what should the owner be looking at quarterly on a regular basis?
I think right back to that financial discussion first, right? I think if you've listened to me long enough talking about any kind of financials, you're going to hear me say you should be looking at things monthly and quarterly. You want to look at
Mhm.
these things in different time horizons, and on a quarterly basis, you certainly want to take a look at your P&L. I think you want to look at your balance sheet. I think you also want to look at, if you have a budget or a forecast, you want to make sure that you're aligning your budget and forecast together. Those are the really smart reviews to do on a quarterly basis. checking in on the rocks, the OKRs. Those are some big ones too, right? Making sure those things are good to go, and then maybe recasting those things. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in our peer groups, especially on our flight plan peer groups, is taking a peek at the business plan. Well, how are you doing relative to the business
Mhm.
plan this quarter versus last quarter, and this quarter versus where you want to be at the end of the year, and make sure that you're on a trajectory to get there. What did I miss?
Talent review. You gotta do those reviews. Nothing like getting a review at the end of the year. If you're only doing them once a year, it's not enough.
Hmm.
Because really, honestly, you don't remember what happened throughout the year. You're only going to remember the last month or so. And it wouldn't be fair if that person maybe had a bad week or one big incident happened and that's all that person is thinking about. So I'm a big person about reviewing, doing reviews, at least having a check in, making sure that the right people are in the right seats still. Things can change.
I like that. I like the quarterly concept around doing a bit of a performance review, because if you wait till the end of the year, or you wait till their anniversary date or whatever, and you have one-on-ones throughout the year,
Hmm.
these performance reviews, especially if you do them quarterly, are surely just a review. You're just sanity checking things. How are things going? What do you have, employee, line up for the next quarter? How can I help you as as the owner, as your leader, to get you set up for whatever the next thing is, and kind of set you up for success too, right? Those are some really powerful conversations. And I know people like to shy away from the traditional, one-on-ones, and they shy away from the performance reviews. But I think doing more of them, and doing them more timely, is way better than waiting to the end of the year, or the which is the worst case, is maybe not doing them at all, right? I've had plenty of conversations
Right.
with MSP business owners who I'm like, "Yeah, I really haven't done a one-on-one with my team." I'm like, Since when?" "Well, ever." "Okay, that's probably gonna be a problem for you at some point in the future." So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it goes
I think
to
that's a good idea.
clarity and alignment.
Right,
How do you know that they're still on the same alignment and path that you need them to be on or that you should be on as a company if you're not
right.
checking in with them?
Exactly. Anything else that we should talk about from an owner perspective? And, certainly we could nuance and dive into many more of these things, but I think with the idea that we don't wanna make this an hour-long conversation, anything else that we missed?
I think that it's just important for owners to really remember that because they are the owner that they can be the biggest barrier and they still need to have a system for their own check-ins and put attention to it. If there's not
Mhm.
intention and intent, it's not going to happen. There's always going to be a fire.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the biggest message here, is that if you don't put deliberate effort into doing
Hmm.
these things, no one's gonna hold you accountable for doing them. So it's incumbent on you, right? Which is one of the reasons why in some of our peer groups, especially the flight plan groups, is that, I make my flight plan groups review their business plan and review their goals every single quarter, because if if I'm not making them do it, the likelihood is they're not doing it, not because they don't think it's important, it's because they got busy with 1,000 other things, and there's some accountability there as well. So, the statement of we fall to the level of our systems is really apt in this regard. So,
Yeah.
if you are a business owner, or really just a leader in any business, and you don't have a system that kind of gets you set up for doing these normal check-ins, that's a thing that you should be doing for sure. So let's shift our conversation from owners to service managers, maybe COOs a little bit, but like the other management within an MSP. What do you think some good daily routines are for people in a service management leadership elsewhere in an MSP?
Yeah, so I think in service management, you're really looking at your tickets. If you don't own your tickets every day, they're gonna own you by the end of the week.
Hmm.
They just are. Making sure that the teams are aligned, so making sure you have dispatch alignment, making sure your SLA reviews, and then honestly, escalation reviews. We used to do those 10-minute stand-ups at the end of the morning, just making sure that, hey, is everything that should have been escalated, and is anyone stuck? So just having that 10 minutes in the morning of checking in with all the people, that's key to making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And that is a daily thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think of the service manager as the ultimate roadblock remover, right?
Mhm.
That's really their job, as a service manager, and finding the places where your team is stuck on things and
Right.
trying to help solve for that. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be the most technical person, right? In fact, when I was a service manager, I was pretty technical, but I routinely preferred to let the people who were smarter than me deal with those things. But it was my job as sort of the the facilitator of what we call the brain trust, right? We get the smart techs in the room if it's a technical issue, and I'm the one facilitating, making sure that we're all on the same page and having a conversation about and solving the issue, and then I maybe help communicate back to the client because usually if it was a truly a stuck thing, that was a
Mhm.
role that I was pretty happy to deal with, certainly over the technical side of the world anyway. Yeah, I think of the service manager as the ultimate roadblock remover, and I love that and making sure the clients are, that they aren't sitting having on tickets are sitting in escalation for days or weeks or whatever, right? That's a really important thing as well.
Yeah, I usually think about it as like the service manager is also the liaison to all the other departments.
Sure.
So if you have multiple departments, projects and account managers, they're the ones that are taking all of those daily things that happen and going making sure that everybody else is informed.
Mhm.
Making sure nobody else is blindsided by something that's happening in service, like, that's part of their job. It's just that daily, "Hey, this is their this is where we stand on these 4 things that are going wrong or the 4 things that are going right," quite honestly.
Fair enough.
Celebrate the wins when you have them.
Yeah, I found that as when I was in the service manager capacity, I tried to do as much of that stuff in the morning as possible because the
Mhm.
day could get away from you in a real hurry, and the better we did about, like, paying attention to that stuff early in the day, set us up for so much more success ongoing. So for me, that was a really important thing because the last thing I wanted to do was be trying to dig into that stuff at 4:30 or 5 o'clock when they're trying to
Yeah.
get out of there and your team is all they're all, heading towards home and all of that too, right? So I would lean towards the morning on a lot of these check-in type of things. What do you think about weekly stuff? From a service manager perspective, what do you look at weekly?
But what I would be looking at weekly is ticket trends for sure. My kill like the couple of KPIs we're looking at, the kill rate. Are we gonna hurt the next week and what do we need to do to plan for it now? Looking we were an EOS house, so looking at doing your L10. What do we need? What problems are we having? That team meeting, whether it's a full L10 or maybe you get 30 minutes with all the different people in your team of, hey, what's really the problem? What are your metrics? And then really for me, it was looking at the next couple weeks, every week, looking out 2 weeks out. Are we going to have some scheduling issues, people off on vacation? What do we need to shift around? And really looking at what capacity we were at so that we did not get blindsided the next week.
Absolutely. That keeping an eye on the bigger piece and the dealing with the capacity and making sure that, to your point, we didn't have people going to be on vacation or that we have a holiday coming up and maybe we need to make sure that we have got coverage around that or those kind of things. And it's similar to what we talk about in peer groups, right? If we had just a little bit more time, which is why we show up to those meetings early, is that because most things can be solved with just a little bit more time, and so paying attention to those things and getting out ahead of things makes a huge difference. Now, here's a potentially a controversial topic. Now, from a kill rate perspective, because I know you mentioned kill rate, are you a kill rate ratio person or are you a kill rate absolutist? Meaning that you are looking for the raw number of tickets you're ahead or behind for the week.
No, I'm looking at a percent. I looked at both. I'm really looking at so I kept an eye on it and I knew in our company, if it went below 95%, I knew that that was my trigger to either borrow somebody from another place or authorize overtime or what is actually going on and really looking at it. So
Sure.
for me, I'm not looking at each day's tick. I did have the graph that showed each day's tickets, but I'm really looking at that one number at the top of like where is our kill rate at the time. But I'm a data junkie, so I mean I had a dashboard and a gauge for everything.
Well, yeah, I was always a kill rate. I wanted the absolute number. Most numbers I didn't want raw. I wanted ratios, but I liked the kill rate. If it was +4, that meant we were 4 tickets behind for the day or for the week. And I loved being under par, -1, -2, -3, or whatever. And
Hmm.
you could see the swings. But this is the first time I heard someone give me a reason why the kill rate ratio, the under 95% means I need to go get help for some other place.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot more sense. And appreciate you bringing it up because we've talked like hundreds of hours and we've never even talked about that. Now I learned something today. So
Yeah,
thank you
we
for
had
that.
it. We had it there. Man, I knew if it was Thursday and we're still at 95%, next week's gonna hurt. And that means I need to start looking at like, do I have a project tech not work busy? Or can I ask some of the technical account managers to work a couple tickets here and there? Or does somebody want to come in early or late and authorize some overtime? But that was our threshold. Under 95%, man, we knew we needed to pull the trigger.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad I took a little bit of a detour on that conversation because that's, again, it was nice to hear a different rationale for that, and I think that I'll probably use that in some of my other conversations that I've had. So if we go past the weekly, and I think I like to think of the service manager's role for the most part being more daily, weekly, and a little bit less monthly, where
Mhm.
where certainly more zoomed in than the owner, right? The owner is really more weekly, monthly, quarterly. I think the service manager is daily, weekly, monthly. What are some of the monthly things that you would want the service manager to pay attention to?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really looked at was ticket trends throughout the whole month so we can see what processes need to be improved upon. Did we have a lot of tickets for we were looking at, our type, subtype, and items of, hey, are there really tickets that are out of control? How many password resets is this one company getting and why are they getting so many? That type of thing. We did look at our KPI review. So we reviewed our SLAs for the month. How did we do? Where do they need to improve? And monthly, honestly, I'm looking at trends at that point of where in the service, when it spiked or went up or down, what can we do to prevent it the next time? And honestly, every month we're doing a review, and quite honestly, it was weekly and monthly of tickets that I call them the tickets that just ran away. Those things that are over 30 days, why are they there? Why did they even get to 30 days? And how do I prevent it the next time?
Yeah, I love all of those things. The one thing that I also looked at, partially this was because I was afforded the opportunity to have a look at the books of the company too. I looked at
No.
financials from a service perspective every month as well, partially at the top level, right? The gross margins of it all, but also the client profitability and some of those things. Now, I oftentimes worked with my account management staff to kind of delegate some of that client profitability metrics to them, but
Yeah.
ultimately it was a thing that I was paying attention to as well.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm once again data junkie. So when I'm talking about financial health of the team, I was probably the thorn in Sarah's side every week of looking at my gross margin. That doesn't belong to me. Why is this here? There was probably 6 months of her just wanting to toss me out the door because that is something I looked at all the time. I wanted to know where we stood. I wanted to know, hey, did we not invoice this? I'm very involved in the monthly invoicing at one point, not long term, but looking at, did we get everything invoiced correctly? Where are we at? Did we miss stuff? We had gauges for that. It was an over under situation, but I think that not an owner not having their service manager involved in the finances, at least above the line finances, you're just crippling yourself.
Yep, absolutely. So I know we just covered a lot of different things we could get into, and as much as I want to keep talking about this, I think it's probably worth us kind of bringing this topic to a close. So if I think about the kind of the overall concept around these routines and the things we want to do, I think the message I want to leave you all with is that routines create a good smart cadence for running your business, and it doesn't actually, it's not restrictive. It's actually should help you reflect and reset and really think about what's coming next. Without these routines, it really slows you down and makes it harder for you to make decisions. Now, do you have any closing thoughts on routines for MSPs?
Mine is grow good habits earlier than later.
Oh yeah,
It is
yep.
a lot easier to get in these routines early on and keep those routines because it's all about good habits. The more good habits you have, the easier it is going to be as you scale and grow. So it's not, if you don't want to call it routine, call it good habit, call it the cadence, whatever, but it is imperative that you put intent on it.
Absolutely. Much like I always say that it's far easier to be profitable when you're a small MSP and then grow profitably all the way through.
Yep.
It's the same exact concept, right? Establish the habits early and tweak them and iterate them, and you're going to be in a much better spot. Well, Natalie, thanks for hanging out with me this afternoon, and we'll catch you all on a future episode.
Bye, everyone.